Okay, so I'm joined by off-the-ball journalist Jonathan Higgins after what was a fantastic win for Galway tonight against Kildare in the All-Ireland Series. Johnny, thoughts on the game?
I suppose ultimately, job done for Galway really. A lot of talk, a lot of hurt after the Connacht final. Obviously, well stated and documented how Galway were going for 5 in a row and looked like they were in not quite cruise position, but looked like they had one hand on the Nester Cup when Damien Comer got that goal. But the Killian McDade injury was a huge impact, and the Riseys came with a blistering storm, and a couple of uppercuts really left Galway on the ropes, and they had to lick their lips. Like, I don't mean this to come across as disrespectful in any shape or form, but let's be honest, this was the perfect draw. This is back to in 01 when Galway were in the first round of the qualifiers playing Wicklow away. This was the perfect opportunity, probably the weakest team in terms of ranking that they could possibly have got. And yeah, Kildare struggled really. Like, you look at their league form, a win and a draw in the first couple of games, 5 defeats in a row in the league, relegation to Division 3, not really building on the momentum of getting in the Tailteann Cup winners. Last year, championship form is up, there's one victory, but then they will rue that Westmeath defeat in the Leinster semi-final. They will certainly rue the missed opportunities. I covered that game, and they had opportunities in the first half, that goal-scoring opportunities. Alex Byrne did force extra time. But it was Westmeath, I suppose, like they did in the Leinster final, who put down the gas. So how are they going to react? And you see there's a lot of talk. I spoke to, like as you always tend up doing, you speak to the opposition people in the county, and there's a little bit of a mini vibe of maybe not really getting on board with the style of football that Kildare are playing. Look, maybe there's a small credible argument in that at times as well, but what you would say is, even when they had a pretty significant breeze, as you'd imagine, coming in off the coast here, down towards the Rock Barton end here in Pearse Stadium in the first half. Now they did get, I think, a couple of I think it was 4 2-pointers they got. Byrne got 2, Loughlin got 1, and then Kerwin got 1 at the end of the first half, if memory serves me right. But for large periods of that game, it was a lot of this slow labour transition. Now it's clearly something that they work on. Is it the best to get the squeeze off? I think the game of football, as we've seen, has gone forward a lot more. I'm not quite sure where the end game is of that, and I know there's a lot of injuries coming back, and it's a fairly significant rebuild that Brian Flanagan has, under his collar here in terms of trying to achieve this one. But even in the second half, it was slow, it was laboured. They did get a couple of nice scores of it, so maybe there's a little bit of counter argument in terms of that. But it never really felt like they were in the game at any stage today. And I know they can say the opposition is Galway, yes, but Galway were okay. I think it's job done really, as you would say, for Galway. Obviously, Finnerty shoots the light out, so he gets the tricolour. Straight away when he gets the ball down over his clubhouse end on his right and pings it over, it's going to be a good day for him. I think it was 1-9 that he ended up with, and the score after half time, the first of the second half, was a beauty. The dummy solo again, I think Ryan O'Toole has some company in terms of that highlight reel for that oh no moment for the dummy solo. And then, now he told me he didn't hit it as clean as he had. I think that's a weird understatement. Pinged it over outside of the left. But the game went really flat there for maybe 5-10 minutes. Galway, their leaders, they stood forward, got pace in the game, and that really is the difference between both sides. It's hard, like Kildare, again, with the greatest respect, I think everyone that has lost their first round games will fancy their chances against Kildare in round 2B on the loser side of the draw. But for Galway, okay, I think, look, a lot of talk about the kickouts, and there's a change in Galway, injury in force with Conor Flaherty being unavailable, back to Cormac Gleeson, who I thought was exceptional today. And now I know we spoke to Keane Darcy as well, and he talked about a lot more movement in terms of options being, I suppose, at the receiving end of teammates wanting the ball, I think is the word that Keane used. As well, but certainly he showed a lot more clubs to the bag there today. There's a couple of dinked ones. There's one that strikes in the middle where the press is on, and he dinks it into the middle zone. He went short, he went left. Now Kildare probably helped the situation in terms of they didn't really press at times, they just retrieved. But he had a really, really good game when you consider the circumstances of his last game in Maroon. Was that cameo, not quite disaster, but difficult cameo down in Leitrim and Carrick and Shannon, where he came on with the Conor Flaherty black card. So that's a big positive for him. Galway definitely learned a lot, and again, I don't want to sound like referencing back to the interviews, but very interested to hear Robert Finney talking about their opposition press out squeeze and how they worked at it. And it was bizarre circumstances at times out here, because Kildare were retrieving off it. Galway were going with a line of 4 with nobody there, almost looking back towards the midfield, almost tagging runner. Very unique to see here in Gaelic football. But Galway, and then at times did a line of 8 across here, across the press. Now if you could got over the other side, which Kildare actually did once down this corner, it was real chicken and egg scenario. But I suppose the summary is Galway worked a lot of kick out. Look, the caveat is the opposition, and that will be the conversation of Pádraig had to rush off to a family communion. But if we had got the opportunity next time to do, we will see I think a hell of a lot more after round 2A when Galway come on. So job done for Galway. But I'm trying to find the right words here. The game was not one for the purists at times. It was really very unlike the modern Gaelic football that we've seen, the renaissance of Gaelic football and the trills and spills and the action. It didn't have any of that. It was flat, it was vanilla. Galway did really try and squeeze the ante in terms of the big players who touched on them, trying to drive forward and get things modern. Job done. They got a couple of debutants as well. Shane McGlinchey, a fine prospect. Shane McGrath was on. Brian Cogger was on. Kieran Mahern made his championship debut as well from the start. So they're the positive side. And obviously the big thing really is it's another 17 minutes for Shane Walsh. It's another 15-20 minutes, shall we say, for Damien Comer. He just gives them that focal point up top. Like, he catches the ball in his corner first thing, he's bang on the left. He's involved straight away. He gives them, even here, Keane speaking about that out ball and Galway would kick, and there was a glorious Paul Conroy kick pass as well for one of the Galway goals. And Galway do have plenty of kickers in the team. With Comer getting, it's probably the biggest positive really, is he comes on, he gets about 15 give or take minutes of football in a game that he really didn't need to be in. So that's a really good sign that he's just getting those building blocks under his belt, because like if Galway are to go anywhere in this championship, they're going to need to him really. At worst, they're going to need a good half an hour, you would say, off him. Ideally, the ideal circumstances, if you can get him back to playing an hour, 50 minutes, an hour, 70 minutes is the dream goal. So getting him back on that and hopefully unscathed. And obviously another big thing as well was Keane Hernan at full back, which has been a bit of a sticky position for Galway for quite some time actually. We've seen various options and the Rossies pulled it apart in the Connacht final. But for me, Keane Hernan is Galway's first best full back. He saw the defensive clearance off the line here in the first half as well. He got 55 minutes back in the clock, so that's good. Obviously Matthew Tierney being back as well after that quad injury, comes back, gets the goal and gives that focal point. It just gives you so much more in terms of just route one arrow. I'm going on and on, but in the end I suppose Galway big players probably stood up at the key times, but there's a huge caveat I think with this. Like, nobody in Galway is going to be going overboard. Job done. They'll wait and see what goes on next weekend. I suppose tomorrow in the Hyde, to see how the Rossies have recovered, how's the hangover there from the Tyrone boys coming down, and then look ahead to the next round of games and that draw. They'll be hoping, I think, twofold: one, to get back here, and secondly, as favourable draw as possible. I think if I Donegal is probably the flavour of the month in that one.
Absolutely, Jonathan. Obviously, Paul Conroy, Rolls Royce for player, absolutely fantastic tonight. He just gets up and down the field, and obviously John Marin. It does go to show when Galway have their full deck on the field, they're running through Kildare, and obviously, opposition, for large parts of the game, probably as you rightly said there, we'll not read too much into it. But when Galway have their full team out, they're impressive.
They are, and they're in that top 4 no matter what way you butter it up. But the caveat, as always, will be, and has been with some time with Galway, is can they get their key players on the pitch at the vital times. They haven't to date. There's always been a bit of, in case of emergency, press the button and try and get someone half strapped up on, and look, it hasn't worked out for Galway. There probably is still a bit off. I think, is that an interesting leveling point for Kerry today in terms of their situation right now? They're not quite on the edge, but obviously they're one defeat away from being knocked out of the championship, that's actually freaky when you hear yourself saying that. That is the reality of the situation. Donegal, will there be any lasting impact? Do the GA have the Leroy G to punish Jim McGuinness like they punished Ger Brennan here? I would say no. But if he was to be removed from the sideline, that completely changes the game, because if there was a manager that is just a perfect tactician and control of the game from the sideline, I would suggest it's Jim McGuinness. And you go to a game and you hear him, you can hear his shouts, you can hear even simple things like the time, etc., etc. I think that would be a significant game changer to the championship. I think that will be brushed under the carpet. I don't see them touching that one. But if he was to start that one, that changes the championship completely. And then what are you left with? You're left with probably Armagh. And then that's probably the top 4, no matter what way. We talked about the championship being wide open. I can't see anyone else coming near that top four. And right now, even over the course of this game week, it's changed a lot, hasn't it? Really, particularly the events of Killarney today.
Yeah. Who will be the front runners for you? I suppose. Look, but it is early days, and obviously that Kerry Donegal game, Jonathan, as well. It's hard to read too much into Kerry. Kerry without injuries today as well. But who will be the front runners for you?
I would have said Donegal, but I think the caveat is how they get the bodies recovered. Langenbach will be a huge positive. They had a lot of raw emotion in that game. I think it was very interesting. I was only catching bits and pieces as on the road, and pulled in it and saw a chunk of it here. But the way they tagged both Cliffords was night and day compared to the All Ireland final, and particularly Paddy. They went hard after both of them, and it was a real bee in their bonnet after Paddy pulled them apart really in the All Ireland final in terms of just exploiting the tactics and exploiting the setup. So that has really hurt them. No matter what they say, that has really hurt them. But they've got that done. Is there an element of down probably to them in terms of really getting up for one particular game? But look, Donegal have proven that they've been so consistent. I think the blip with down probably in hindsight might be the best thing that ever happened to them, because it allowed them, not that they needed it really, but to get that pep in their step and that really us against the world, or we have a point to prove certain circumstance, and that Kerry bullseyes put to one side for now. Very interesting to see how they react. Very interesting to see who they get in the draw. Actually, both ends of that really spectrum, isn't it? Like who gets Kerry in that knockout game. Kerry will, with the greatest respect, will probably hoping that it's Kildare, and then maybe is that Kildare or is that Kerry back into surroundings again, and they can nurse the bodies back in. But if they have to do what Galway have done in terms of forcing bodies back ahead of time, and they haven't really been tested really in in terms of the league was the league, and you never read too much into that. Munster, nothing really. I know Cork had that fine victory over Meath today, but nah. Do you know what I mean? In terms of raw games, how much will that come across them in 3 weeks' time when they play? So they're probably like the 1-2, but like that Kerry one could crumble. The Donegal one could significantly change. Armagh is going to be quite interesting to see how they react after eventually getting over the line in Ulster. Will there be a potential hangover, like we'll see potentially with the Rossies tomorrow in the Hyde? Who knows? But you have to say that's probably maybe is there fluidness really with Kerry and Armagh? Could they swap places right now in terms of the 1-2? But definitely Donegal have to be the top. They're the team that I think everyone would fear if they saw coming out against them in the other side of the draw. And
John, and obviously we all look at Shane Walsh every time he's playing. It is all eyes on him because he's just a miraculous talent. Him and David Clifford are just phenomenal footballers. Maybe off the beaten track in the first half, but he did get a goal in the second half, and when he does get going, he's incredible to watch.
He is, and I think it's more just getting more games under the belt, allowing these quote-unquote mistakes or areas in the game to sharpen up, because realistically you can train down in Lough George or Salt here in the stadium as much as you want, but you have to get in to the raw intensity of championship. Maybe intensity is the wrong word today, but you got to get in that role of games, playing regularly and just getting in a flow. Like I thought he was outstanding in the Connacht final for large periods. It showed a raw bit of pace, and like watch the way he chased back Neary in the first half and in the Hyde as well. Like that burning pace is there. Probably will be disappointed with a couple of efforts today. The first turnover, a couple of drops short either side. Even the one at the end could have been a goal potentially, but it blazed over. But like the most important thing is getting consistency, getting that muscle memory, and building up that bit of team spirit and that chemistry that Galway haven't had for so many years, and getting himself in Cork. You see the two of them combined there, and it's like the glory days for Galway. So that is important. Just getting another one, hopefully touch wood and all that, it's unscathed. But that really is, and look, these little bit of dirt in the tank in terms of little quote-unquote mistakes or things that maybe aren't at full perfection yet. I think it's all part of the bumps and bruises of just this championship player, but I think just getting them back in is hugely important.
Massively important. Well, John and Higgins, thanks a million for joining me tonight. Great game here tonight, and on Galway go to the next round, and all Kildare could go to the next round. Thanks very much.
No bother at all.